Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Salmon Cole podcast, brought to you by Black Creek Outfitters, right there in the town center, originally there before the town center was built. Actually, and you probably heard me say before, Joe Butler told me that when they built that place, it was interesting because the guy who was the builder said that if you do a grid of Jacksonville, it really is the center of town. That really is, since Jacksonville was incorporated. So stop by and see them. They've got all the different things that you're looking for: tech shirts, summertime stuff. Got some interesting water shoes and things that you might, if you're going to go do any hiking or whatever. All that can be found at Black Creek Outfitters, right there at the town center. Cole, it's as the saying goes, if I told you where the USA soccer team would be after 2 games with 4 points and a chance to advance, with either a win or a draw against Germany, if I told you that 2 weeks ago, you'd have gone, okay. And then, you watch the game against Portugal and you go, no, that's not good enough.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. And you think about how it played out. We talked on this podcast, I think, about, all right, beat Ghana, draw Portugal, take your chances on what happens with Germany, and you feel pretty good about it. And then you sit there and you watch that game, and wasn't that game exactly the kind of back and forth drama that the World Cup should be all about? You've got an underdog-ish team, ranked 13th or something in the world, against a team number 4 in the world with the number 1 player in the world, at least the defending World Player of the Year, and U.S. goes down early, comes back. And to trail that early and then come back and take the lead, and if you think about it, you think about when they played their best. The U.S. did not play particularly well at all in the first half. I think they were kind of fortunate to be just down 1-0 in the first half.
Absolutely, absolutely correct. It's one of those things that, you look at Portugal, who is, a traditional power, if not power, but certainly a traditional team that's expected to get to the 16, along with Spain and Italy and England and Germany, and obviously half of those teams are not going. The English are not going. The Spanish are not going. And the U.S. still has a chance to get there. I know it's a little bit blasphemous to not like Ian Darke, but I really don't. I'm just not a big fan of his.
Why not?
Well, I just think that he does not bring an American sensibility to the game, and I just think he's a little condescending to the audience of Americans who are watching, and so I'm not real big on that. And I must have yelled 10 times at the television yesterday, "Shut up, Ian." Because at the end of the game, he's gone, and the Americans are going through. USA has never beaten back-to-back teams in the World Cup, hasn't beaten a European team since 1930. He's going on and on. I'm like, shut up, Ian. Okay.
You're going with the broadcaster's jinx, huh?
Absolutely. That's part of it. But I've never been a big fan of his, and I know that's a little bit blasphemous. But nonetheless, watching the game, the end of the game is one of the reasons that Americans have been slow to accept the game, as it goes against the fiber of what America was kind of built on: hard work and a lot of concentration. At the very end of the game, it appeared. Now, I'm not saying that this happened at all, but it appeared that there were some things that were going on that the team did not have enough of a focus on. We need to give them our best 5 minutes right here, and we advance.
Yeah, and I thought the U.S. did a terrible job of possessing the ball late.
Right in the stoppage time, and Graham Zusi made a nice run and did the exact right professional thing down in the left corner, but Michael Bradley got dispossessed, and the center back lost his man. And when you have the best player in the world and one of the best finishers out there, they're going to score if you give them that opportunity. It's not as if Ronaldo is not going to pass the ball perfectly because he's going to do that. It's not going to be that the guy isn't going to hit it into the net. I mean, this isn't college soccer. This is the best players in the world. You give them that opening, they're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too to watch this because I think if you were to ask 100 soccer observers who the 3 best players in the world are right now, I think you might get a few dissensions here and there, but by and large you'd get Messi and Neymar and Ronaldo. Do you agree? Those would be the 3 that most people would say.
Three of yeah, right? Absolutely.
And it's so interesting to see the different personalities of those guys and how they conduct themselves on the field, and how Messi kind of comes across as kind of an everyman, whereas Ronaldo is this very polished. He's a brand, as they were talking about in the build-up.
The drama that is Cristiano Ronaldo.
That's right. Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah.
And he looked, and when he was offsides, he looks over at the line judge like, maybe not. Like, I'm gonna decide whether I was offside. I'm Ronaldo.
It's not like the young catcher who tries to frame a pitch and the umpire says, "Son, Ted Williams will tell you if it was a strike or a ball." It doesn't work that way.
Which actually happened.
Yeah, and I think it might have been Johnny Oates or somebody who was the catcher. I can't remember.
Right.
So, but the point being here is you've got these guys, and then you got Neymar, who is this young, energetic, plays like a Brazilian. Right. So here's the thing, and if they're very obvious personality traits on the U.S. team, who has shown the most of his own kind of personal brand and personality in this tournament so far?
Nobody, maybe.
I mean, maybe Tim Howard, right?
Maybe a little bit.
There hasn't.
Nobody has emerged as this. Oh, we can look at that guy and go, oh, he represents American soccer.
Yeah, and so here you have some of these great teams with great individual players, and the U.S. so far is kind of doing it by committee, but I think that may hurt them at some point. That we'll see what. It's very interesting to me now what's going to happen with Germany, because Germany with the draw gets the top seed, they move on, and that's all they need. They don't want to expend any more energy in the heat of Brazil or anything else. And Jurgen Klinsmann obviously knows a few of the folks over on that side.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to get a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge action here?
A convenient tie is what they keep calling it, right? And that would be. I don't think that's going to happen. Klinsmann did not leave the German national team under the best situation when he moved to America, and moved to America without really a job. I mean, lived in L.A. for a while.
A handful of Germans with him, by the way, as it turns out.
Right, but he's not. He's not. It's not like he's still a national hero among fans, but among the German Soccer Federation, it's not like they're like, oh, we wish Klinsmann was our coach, because he was at one point, and has kind of a different.
And his protege is now the coach. So I mean, there is a connection there with those. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't know if you saw this. The TV ratings were enormous, as you would expect.
Sure.
Highest rated soccer game ever on ESPN. Same TV ratings, at least in the overnights. Those could get adjusted as some of the numbers come in. But same ratings as the 2012 NBA Finals Game 7. That was the Celtics and Heat. And Jacksonville was one of the top 15 markets in the country in terms of TV ratings for that.
8.4, and the ratings for the match were only equaled by one World Series game in the last 10 years.
Wow, how about that?
So how about that? So I mean, yeah, as much as America's pastime is how baseball still calls themselves. It is not, from a television standpoint, this was a much more captivating thing. And having been a sportscaster for a long time, there's not many opportunities for us to say us. To root. The 1980 hockey team was really the last time that I felt that America was kind of captivated as a whole. And whenever you draw from the totality of 330 million Americans, instead of Laker fans, Knick fans, Jaguar fans, Florida State fans, whatever they are, you're going to get a much bigger number, particularly when you have this kind of interest. And to expand upon what we talked about the last time about why there's more dissemination of social media, more opportunity. This game broadcast live on national cable television, where there's more than 90% penetration of cable and satellite in a place like Jacksonville. You don't have to, if this game was broadcast in 1994 on cable and satellite only, you only would have reached a maximum of about 65% of Americans. But now you're talking about 95% of Americans that have the ability to see it, whether it's on cable or satellite. In addition to that, Cole, the thing I've been thinking about since our last conversation, the journalists that are involved in covering this particular World Cup have a lot more experience and familiarity with the game. Many of them played the game as kids because it became much more of a acceptable Saturday morning activity, as acceptable as baseball or softball or whatever. So there's a lot more journalists who are familiar with the game. The 1994 World Cup being played here was something that was obviously part of it. So, and then the people who are in the decision-making spots are also familiar with the game. I mean, sports writers like Dan Jenkins, people in that generation, they didn't know anything about the game, didn't care about the game. It was a European game, and it had nothing to do with America. Now, you're talking about a lot of people who are influential journalists around the country and in newsrooms making decisions about what to cover, who see this as an important part of the sports landscape.
And if I can throw a theory out along the same lines, I think that over the last 15 years, and maybe we could go back to 9/11, and talk about the way that we as Americans have looked at the world differently than we did previously. That we have a different expectation, a different awareness maybe, and I think because of that, the awareness of and the access to world soccer broadcasts and so forth, I think we're in a different place to kind of accept this stuff or to start to internalize it a little bit, that it's not just us against the world, that you can get out there and recognize, boy, did that match mean a lot to Algeria? What did it mean that Algeria became the first African team to score 4 goals in a World Cup game, or what does it mean for Belgium, or what does it mean for fill in the blank country? Maybe it's just because this is where I am. 15 years ago I was in my mid-20s. Now I'm in my early 40s, and so my perspectives, I've traveled more, and my perspective is a little bit different. I think by and large you have a lot of people whose perspective is different now in the jingoistic camp than it was, the day before 9/11.
You also, though, can walk through the town center in January, and it's not unusual to see somebody wearing a Man U jersey or an Argentina jersey, whereas 15 years ago you never would have seen that. So the exposure to the game on a global scale for Americans is there, and it's marketed now with Man U being partners with the Yankees, and even in Jacksonville with our NFL owner owning a team in London. Those things all start to connect, and they start to build and give us a perspective that we didn't have before. But I tell you what, watching that game yesterday, I mean, if you were with a group of people watching,
I was.
Yeah. Okay, you're watching it, you're like, we give up that first goal, and you're like, man, this is so typical of us, right? And so now we're down 1-0. And gets to halftime. They've had a couple of chances. They're like, man, we're going to play better in the second half. So actually do. Possess the ball better, pass the ball better, create more scoring opportunities. Tie the game at 1-1. Take the lead at 2-1. And now you're biting your fingernails. And the guy puts 5 minutes on. Now you're really biting your fingernails. and everybody is really excited. And then it was the exact same reaction, I bet, in every living room and in every bar and in every restaurant I was watching. They score, expletives are screamed, and everybody walks around like this. Right?
And that's exactly what happened. And I'll give you where we watch you. So I was filling in on Channel 4 again, and
right.
Left to go out to where the Armada was having their watch party at the Shim Sham room out at the beach. Left 6:35 or something after the 6 o'clock news. We go out there. Kevin Talley comes with us, and he's got the camera and shoot. By the way, Kevin got some great shots. Zoomed in on the TV, and then zoomed back out at the scores. I mean, it's perfectly timed. You did a great job with that. But at the end of it, it was like the only feeling way I can recount it, because that place was jam packed, as was every bar out at the beach. By the way, I mean, it was loaded up. But it was, if you've ever had your team at a Final Four, where you're not just a championship game, but in a national semifinal, where there are fan bases from 3 other teams around, and you lose, and now what? Because you've made plans to stick around till Monday, but your team loses on a Saturday, and you just kind of go, like you said,
what?
What? And it's like the visceral reaction overwhelms your ability to like put a good face on it for a couple of minutes, because you're just like, wow. And I'm not sure that would have happened with as many people 4 years ago or 8 years ago with the World Cup. Again, I think people care more now than they used to.
The exposure to it is absolutely exponentially higher, and it has to do with all those things we talked about. NBC showing the Premier League, the friendly being played here, the ESPN covering the national team as a legitimate kind of sport next to basketball and football and baseball and hockey. I mean, all that adds together, and the age group, people who were 21 years old 4 years ago are now 25 years old. Some of them, more established, and like you said, even your perspective from 15 years ago was very different. Couldn't get my news director in 1994 to be interested in the World Cup at all, and it was being played here,
in the
United States. And I mean, games. There were games about every 5 days in Orlando. No interest whatsoever to cover any of that.
All right, let's move on to the Jaguars, and we'll follow up this with the podcast after the Americans play Germany. But let's follow up with the Jaguars here. About a 5-week time period off where they're not going to be back on the field before training camp starts. And the question I keep getting, and I get it probably daily from somebody, is the same question, which is no surprise. What do you think about Bortles? Everybody wants to know where Bortles is, and my answer has been he had some good days and he had some bad days, and maybe the best thing that he showed is that he had good days after bad days. And so, showing some ability to bounce back. And as much as we talked about his toughness, the Jaguars really lauded his toughness as one of the reasons why they made him the 3rd pick of the draft. I want to see when training camp rolls around the preseason, I want to see him standing in against a rush. I want to see how he responds to having something coming at him other than, an exercise ball and a blocking pad is being thrown at his feet to try to distract him. I want to see what happens when there are grown men trying to make a living for themselves in the NFL coming after him in the preseason.
There is a similarity to when you look at a 2-year-old colt and look at a 3-year-old who's going to go compete in the Kentucky Derby and decide whether or not that 2-year-old is going to grow into that. And he looks still to me like that guy, the raw version of what they expect him to be and to develop. They talked about the development between year 1 and year 2 and what they saw in him and they didn't see in Johnny Manziel, which, by the way, there were many things they didn't see in Johnny Manziel that fit. But, he looks like that guy who can put on 10 pounds of muscle, who can get a tick faster when he's running, whose arm can get a foot quicker, getting rid of the ball. He looks like that he can, in fact, have that kind of development. From a mental standpoint, he's the anti-Blaine Gabbert at this point. He's engaged with his teammates. He's engaged with the media. He's engaged with the community. When you ask him a question, he looks you in the eye. He doesn't act like you're somehow attacking him in some way. He doesn't have a sense of entitlement whatsoever. He's the anti-Gabbert in every situation when it comes to being in that locker room. And I think that you can easily find the same thread that runs through all of these players that are being brought in by Dave and by Gus, both via the draft and via free agency. Whether it's, where it is in their personality may be different, but they all have that same, when you talk to them, that same sensibility of competition, of wanting to be better, of wanting to be here, of wanting to be on this team, and wanting to go out and do a good job.
Yeah, and I would even say they embrace the opportunity to earn it. They're not expecting that it's going to be given to them.
Yeah, no sense of entitlement. That's exactly right.
So,
and you've worked in the Channel 4 Sports Department, and one of the reasons that you fit in so well in our department is because you have the same kind of idea. If you screw up a broadcast, I don't have to tell you that. You know it before anybody. I know it. Right. When I screw up, I know it. Kevin, Matt, virtually everybody who's ever worked in the department that really fits in, and that's the kind of guys they have on this team. They know. I mean, I had a consultant say to me, we were sitting there talking, and she was giving me a lot of praise, and she said, well, what do you think? And I said, nobody knows when they're mailing it in quicker than I do. I know when I'm mailing it, okay? And it rarely happens, okay? But when I'm mailing it in, I already know it. You don't have to tell me. Because I'm mailing it in because my mind's somewhere else. But
right, yeah. Once you start thinking about vacation, you're already on vacation.
Right. So you go in that locker room, and it's that kind of guy that's in there. And it was funny that they cut Babin last week because he was on the fringe of that. He kind of had that, but he kind of was a little bit of, I'm Jason Babin.
He always struck me as a guy who knew what he was expected to do, how he was expected to behave, and what the expected attitude was, but it wasn't in his nature. He was like the kid who was really trying hard not to act out in class, who's hypertension and ADD or whatever else, and he knew what he was supposed to do, and so it always seemed like there was some kind of a battle going on there with Babin. To his credit, there wasn't any kind of major issue that cropped up, but he's the Larry Brown of pass rushers. He doesn't stay long in any one place. Sometimes it's his doing, sometimes it's somebody else's doing.
Right, exactly. We'll see. It's a fun week. USA plays on Thursday. Several things going on throughout the week that Cole and I will get to, and we'll talk after the USA plays. It's a noon. Is that the broadcast or is that the actual start time?
I think start time is noon and 11:30 for the broadcast start.
Broadcast time. So that's coming up. We'll do something Thursday. Give you our thoughts about what happens with us. A lot of ways for the USA to get in. A few ways for us to get out too. So you hope that controlling your own destiny is certainly part of that, and they play at that at that level. I can tell you this, Cole. Saw Clint Dempsey play with the national team in friendlies. I went to London and saw him play with Fulham on loan over there. Seen him play with the Sounders on TV. Much different player when he's playing for the United States. He's the kind of player that you want on your team when he's playing in a real game for his country, because he was clearly playing at Fulham to not get hurt and just collect a paycheck. And maybe a lot of players around the world were doing that this season as they moved toward the World Cup because they wanted to do that. And, his interview after the game was so anti-sports fan American that's, he was like, well, you got to think of it and get what. No, we wanted you to really be pissed off. We wanted you to be mad. We wanted you to yell and scream and stomp your foot, but that's just not how the sensibility of the game is. Nonetheless.
And by the way, the English soccer journalists all think Clint Dempsey is a full-on man for playing without a face mask and playing out there with a broken nose. You know what he is? He's a Texan.
There you go. Very good. Who went to Furman, by the way?
Who went to Furman? Yeah, with Andy Kidd, who is the athletic director at Episcopal High School. They played soccer together.
And when Andy was a senior, they were roommates on the road.
Yep, there you go.
Good stuff.
All right, we'll take this opportunity to wrap it up for this edition. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Sam and Cole podcast, presented by Black Creek Outfitters. And hit us on Twitter, Sam at Sam Kavares, me at Cole Pepper. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to talking to you next time right here on the Sam and Cole podcast.